Hey guys, Youngblood with you, and what I want to do today is actually compare a couple of the ships that are for sale right now in the anniversary sale. And that's going to be the Karthu All, otherwise known as the Xi'an Scout, and the Super Hornet. Now the reason I'm actually comparing these two is because I really do feel that these are two that are combat-oriented, two-person crafts that carry zero cargo. So based on those stats alone, I feel like they're going to be kind of the main two competitors for each other. And these two ships are the ones that I'm personally having the harder time with on my comparisons. As far as what I want to buy. When I kind of look at them, I look at the price tag, and they both are pretty close to each other. But at the same time, they're really different ships. Now, as we talk about this, I'm going to throw out a disclaimer that I'm going to be using some stats off the ship stats page, so they could be very, very wrong. It has been before, so it wouldn't surprise me if that's the case again. On top of that, we're going to get more information on the Xi'an Scout on Wednesday. Ben's actually said that they're going to be doing an announcement, kind of like showcases of some of these ships. I believe today we're going to see information about the Retaliator. Tomorrow we're going to see something about, crap, I don't remember, maybe the Gladiator. And then I think Wednesday is definitely going to be the Xi'an Scout. So all this information could be moot. It could all be crazy wrong, or who knows, maybe it's accurate. But let's go ahead and just dive into it. Now, when we actually compare the two ships, the Xi'an Scout is 10 meters long, 8 meters wide, and 24 meters tall. Now, that in itself is an interesting setup. Ultimately, it's kind of like a B-Wing, flying like that. Now, obviously, it's a little bit wider, so maybe it's more like that, something. But, it's very tall, and that's not really like any ships we've seen in Arena Commander so far. Most of the ships fall in line with more traditional flights that we've seen. And, when we talk about the Super Hornet, 24 meters long, 21.75 meters wide, and 5.3 meters tall. And I think this shape is kind of indicative of what the ships are actually good at. The Super Hornet is pretty much flying at you like this. It's got a, it's a wide ship, and it's very long as well. So what that means is it's going to be harder to hit head on. It's not that tall, and that's specifically just comparing these two ships. Now, that makes a lot of sense with what the Hornet brings to the fight, and the Hornet's bringing a lot of teeth. It's got 8 weapons on it, so it makes a lot of sense for it to want to be able to put all those on target. Now, for something like the Scout, if it's flying like this vertical plane is going to be at the front of the ship is the biggest target overall. Now, if you're looking at a combat ship, that's kind of an interesting component. Now, we're going to get into propulsion in just a second, but the ship is supposed to be pretty much unparalleled as far as its maneuverability. And with that being the case, this may not be that big of a deal. You may have maybe I should go like this. You may have a lot of space to hit on the front of the ship, but if you are so maneuverable that you don't have to worry about the front of your ship being in the gun lines of the enemy, maybe that's an okay trade-off. So it just kind of makes sense on the design and what their intended purposes are. Now, the weights of the ships are pretty far off too, not as staggering, but the Scout comes in at 15,000 kilograms and the Super Hornet comes in at 23,000 kilograms. Now, it's worth noting that just by doing a simple, width times height times depth, and that's not going to be perfect considering ships have different sizes and different aspects to them, but the Hornet appears to have more surface area overall. So it makes sense for it to be a little bit heavier, but it also carries more guns, and it may also make sense, and it may show that the Super Hornet is going to have more armor than the Scout does. Now, the Scout is going to be lighter, and I think a lot of that's going to be because it prefers to avoid damage instead of actually absorbing damage. Now, where we get really interesting is, and I think these are going to be the two primary differences between the ships, the propulsion. Now, the Scout has 4 times TR3 maneuvering thrusters, and it doesn't really have main thrusters that we're used to seeing, something on the back of the ship that's pushing it forward. What we're seeing out of the Scout, and if it continues to stick to the description that we've seen before, is going to be articulated housings for bigger thrusters, maneuvering thrusters. So instead of having that one big engine, it's going to have 4 maneuvering thrusters that are actually on like a ball. And I think if we can just kind of visualize that, this may look dirty, I haven't practiced this. You've got this ball that moves, and you've got the maneuvering thruster. So this can move independently, and this can move independently. So, yeah, that probably does look dirty. So if you compare those two, and you've got 4 things that can actually do that, the ship's going to have interesting movement abilities. And on top of that, it's got 8 TR2 maneuvering thrusters, which are going to be more like the standard ones that we've seen on the ship. Where I'm interested in seeing is what the actual output of these TR3 maneuvering thrusters are going to be that are kind of supplementing or kind of pretending to be the main thruster of the ship. You know, I look at this ship and it's labeled as a civilian version of the Xi'an's combat vessel. And to me, and you know, when it's listed as an explorer or a scout, both of those are roles where it could really benefit from having speed, especially as a scout. I mean, you're going to be a terrible scout if you're slow. So I think the output's going to be better than we can just expect by thinking about traditional maneuvering thrusters providing forward momentum. We'll just kind of have to see how that all ends up playing out. Either way, though, I think the articulated, you know, aspect of those 4 main maneuvering thrusters is going to be really interesting in how this ship actually performs. Now, when we talk about the Hornet, it's got 1 TR4 primary thruster. We've seen it in Arena Commander, and we know so far that the Hornet can be painfully slow at times. Add to the fact that the Super Hornet's a little bit heavier, and it is going to be a fairly slow ship. Now, it can take a beating, and it can dish out a lot of damage, so I don't think speed's a big deal for it. And we also know kind of how it's going to perform, too, considering it's going to have 8 TR2 maneuvering thrusters. Now, what's going to be different, though, is the Super Hornet's got a better power plant. Now, I wouldn't look at that immediately and say that's going to be a tremendous advantage. And the reason that I say that is because there's only so much it can do. You know, the ship itself can either be really good at, you know, utilizing that extra power to shoot more stuff, or it can use that to maneuver more. And I think with a ship like this, it's going to be shooting a lot often. So the power plant may make it a little bit better and may kind of help to counteract some of what we've seen from the, you know, the additional weight. But we'll just have to wait and see. Overall, I fully expect the Scout to be a lot more agile. I mean, not even close. And I would expect it to be, numbers will have to show it and we'll have to see it in game, but I would expect it to be significantly faster too, even though I know so little about these crazy-ass thrusters that are going to be on the back of it. Now, when we talk about armament, this is kind of another category that's there's a clear winner, and that's going to be the Super Hornet. The Super Hornet's packing 8 weapons. It's got 2 on the nose. It's got 2 on the nose's canard turret. It's got 2 on the wings. It's got 2 on the ball turret up top. And on top of that, it's got 8 missiles. Thing's armed to the teeth. I keep saying that, but it's absolutely true. And I think that's where that primary power plant, that bigger power plant, is going to really be coming in and helping it out. You know, the Scout has a Class 1 and a Class 2. And we don't know what they are. You know, it could be 1 Class 1 and 1 Class 2 for all we know. Now, I don't think it's going to be that way, but I don't expect the civilian version or the stock version to come with missiles. I think it's going to be like some of the other ships that we've seen where you can equip them later on. I don't think it's going to get a Class 4 either. I think it's just going to have probably 2 by Class 1s and 2 by Class 1s and 2 by Class 2s. Now their sizes, maybe those are a little bit bigger. You know, maybe they have less weapons, but they do a little bit more damage. But remember, the strength of this ship is about maneuverability. It's agility. It's supposed to be probably more like a light fighter, similar in line to like a Gladius. Avoid the damage, deal it out when you can, and it's going to kind of play out that way. So I'm really looking forward to getting more specifics about this ship. I hope by Wednesday they can give us a little bit more information. It's still a concept ship in general, so I think a lot can change with it, whereas the Super Hornet's much further along in the development process. So we'll just have to see how it all plays out. Now, the last thing is, and I think if you're kind of on the fence like I am, is going to be taking advantage of the ships and getting the one that's best for you. And I think, you know, what we're going to see is these maneuverable ships, the ones that are like this Karthu All, the one that's going to really take advantage of a ship's maneuverability is going to be the ship or the control scheme. I just kind of rambled on there a little bit. The control scheme may help you make this decision. If you envision yourself being a mouse and keyboard player, then all of a sudden you're going to be able to take more advantage of the individual maneuvering thrusters through the 6 degrees of freedom of the strafe. Now, on my HOTUS X52 Pro, I've got this little thing right here on my throttle tied to my strafing. So I can strafe up, down, left, right, whatever. So I'm not going to say that you can't be successful with the ship or you can't take full advantage of it. However, I think if you are going to be in a situation where you're playing with a mouse and a keyboard, the Karthu All is going to be a better choice for you. For the Super Hornet, I guess I should also clarify, that also plays into the Super Hornet as well, though, because of said mouse. having all those gimbaled weapons is going to be a real advantage. And, you know, I'm using Track IR, so I can kind of take advantage of some of that. And some of our brethren that are playing with a HOTA setup without the Track IR aren't getting the full advantage of the gimbaled weapons right now. Lots of control scheme changes so far. I imagine it's going to continue to change. But there's a benefit to the different control schemes. So personally, if I'm looking at these, I'm probably going to say, if I'm good at taking advantage of 6 degrees of freedom right now, then I think the Scout's probably the better choice here. Or if you're just someone who says, I'm willing to put in the time to master that aspect of flight, then I think the Scout becomes the better choice. If you prefer atmospheric style flight, the coupled mode flight, where your nose is always first and you're going to be doing turns and Immelmans and split S's, then I think the Super Hornet becomes possibly a better choice. You know, you just want to keep your weapons facing forward, and all you need to worry about is killing your momentum, keeping your guns facing forward, and you go from there. You can be successful with either of these. Either way, I think it's that flight style that is going to be kind of what we want to use to kind of determine which way you want to go. Do you envision yourself spending the time to get really good with the 6 degrees of freedom using the strafe? If you do, I think the Xi'an Scout has the higher skill ceiling, and then kind of gives you that option to be the best dogfighter out there. If you prefer to just fly normal and just bring as much to the fight as possible and just unleash hell, then the Super Hornet's probably going to be the best bet. Ultimately, there's too many unknowns for us to really make a good decision on this. We don't know enough about the Xi'an Scout at the moment to really say definitively one way or the other. Wednesday's going to shine a lot more light onto this. I've got family stuff and work going on Wednesday, so I'm probably not going to be able to do a follow-up on this until later, but hopefully this at least gives you some things to consider until we get to that point. So until the next video, stay tuned for more. Appreciate you guys watching as always. Take care.